Yeah, raise.
Morning, everybody. Just a sound check for you joining in. Just admitting some more colleagues into the session, so we'll be with you in a few minutes' time. Please remember to use the chat room if you want to greet each other. We will tell you a little bit more about the chat room just now. But welcome, everybody. Sound check. The recordings of this meeting will be made available afterwards. You will receive links to receive this on YouTube, to view it on YouTube. Thank you. Right, ladies and gents, while we're admitting some more colleagues into the session, let's talk a little bit about the chat room. You're most welcome to make use of the chat room, obviously, to network and greet each other. But please remember to keep the discussions related to what's being presented. And please do not use the chat room for marketing purposes and so on. We really appreciate that. So, ladies and gents, then also, please keep yourselves on mute. Otherwise, we've got too much background noises and so on. So we appreciate if you keep yourselves on mute and enjoy the session. We will be back with you in 2 minutes' time. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gents, you're welcome to use the chat room during the session to, text questions to the panelists, and then the chair will then have a look at the questions, and they will see who can be, which questions can be addressed. So, kindly use the chat room then for your questions. Once recognized by the chairperson, you will also be allowed to ask questions and so on, but please keep the questions as far as possible to the chat room. Thank you very much. Right, ladies and gents, I'm handing you over to Chairman of ARIA, Mr. James Holly, to chair the brief meeting for us. Thank you very much, James.
Harry, thank you very much, and very warm welcome to everybody that's joining us today for the open session of the Africa Rail Industry Association Annual General Meeting. As I'm sure you have all noted, we have an outstanding lineup ahead of speakers for us today, really headlined by Michelle Phillips, who will be giving us the keynote address. Michelle is, of course, the group chief executive, the new group chief executive of Transnet Group. After that, we will be hearing from Cyprian Marawa, who's the head of transport, logistics, and bulk water sectors at DBSA. And finally, our good friend Howard Rosen will be telling us about the giant leaps that the Luxembourg Protocol has recently taken around in its global adoption. As always, I will start the session with the report back into where we see the industry as the association at the moment. Throughout the session, we will be taking questions through the chat room. Please do raise any questions that you have. We do have relatively limited time, but we have asked the speakers to keep some time available for questions. And we will try and address as many as we can in the limited time that we have. So moving on then to the report back as to where we are at an industry. I'll start with the following. Our freight logistics system is undergoing a process of rapid and fundamental change to improve its efficiency and position it for the future. This roadmap sets out a clear plan to guide its process, outlining what we aim to achieve and how we will get there. The positive impact of these reforms cannot be overstated. By introducing competition in freight rail operations while maintaining state ownership of the routes, we will unlock massive new investment in South Africa's rail system. This will support jobs in every sector in the economy, from mining to manufacturing to agriculture. Similarly, by upgrading and expanding our port terminals through innovative public-private partnerships, we will position South Africa as a leading player in the global markets. Every product that we buy is affected by the logistics system. If the system works well, the cost of transporting goods is cheaper and every consumer benefits. At the same time, efficient logistics networks allow South African products to compete at a global scale. This is what we will achieve through the actions contained in this roadmap. By implementing bold, transformative reforms, we can overcome the many challenges facing our logistics system. We will spare no effort to ensure that it is executed fully and swiftly. Those are the words of President Cyril Ramaphosa in his opening statements to the Freight Logistics Roadmap that was approved by Cabinet just 4 months ago. The same document goes on to say the following about the rail network in South Africa. Many of the efficiency problems in the freight rail network are due to a backlog in maintenance in infrastructure investment. Transnet has acknowledged the existence of a significant infrastructure investment backlog in rail, but to date has struggled to effectively address it. Insufficient investment in the maintenance and upgrading of the network infrastructure has resulted from a number of factors, including weak implementation capability, constraints in the procurement system, and the diversion of resources from maintenance to operating requirements. This has created a vicious cycle as a lack of investment reduces availability, which in turn reduces revenue and investment. Additional investment, both public and private, must be crowded in order to close the maintenance backlog, especially on priority corridors, which are experiencing security of supply challenges. Now, this must be the most terrifying, but also the most exciting time in the long, deep, rich history of South Africa's railways. Many of our members' businesses have been badly impacted by the current position of the industry. But as an industry, we can choose to be despondent because of where we find ourselves, or we can decide to work with government to implement the solutions that have been developed and presented. It is my ask that we decide the latter. It is always darkest before the dawn. The challenge the rail industry faces in South Africa is significant. Here are some numbers to give perspective. In the financial year ended 2019, PRASA moved 209 million commuters. In 2023, that had reduced by 92% to just 16 million. In 2019, PRASA moved 387,000 long-haul passengers. In 2023, that had reduced by 99.5% to just 2,000. In the financial year ended 2018, Transnet moved 226 million tonnes. In 2023, that had reduced by 34% to 149 million tonnes. In 2012, Transnet Freight Rail spent 3.348 billion rand in maintenance. In 2023, despite a decade of inflation, Transnet Freight Rail spent less than that, at 2.8 billion rand on maintenance. ARIA estimates that the backlog maintenance underspend from 2013 to 2023 is 29.9 billion rand. The Gain Institute from Stellenbosch has calculated the drop in rail freight volumes cost South Africa 5.3% of GDP in 2022 and 4.5% of GDP in 2023. In the context of South Africa's joblessness and constrained fiscal position, I think we can agree with government that we are in a logistics crisis. At the time of the AGM last year, we congratulated government on the approval of the national rail policy by cabinet. This year, we need to congratulate government on the following: the formation of the National Logistics Crisis Committee and as an interministerial committee reporting directly to President Ramaphosa with strong representation from business. The implementation and capacitation of the interim rail economic regulatory capacity. The cabinet approvals of the following: the Economic Regulation of Transport Bill, which is now awaiting presidential signature into law, having been approved by the National Council of Provinces a few weeks ago, the Freight Logistics Roadmap, and the Private Sector Participation Framework for Rail. At PRASA, we have seen the introduction of more of the world-class Gabella-Alstom trains moving commuters across South Africa. The prediction that this financial year will see an increase in commuter numbers of 118% to 35 million is very encouraging. Still way off where we were, but an important turning of the tide. PRASA is procuring again, and on the ground, we are seeing the benefit for our members. Similarly, at Transnet, we are hopeful that the 2024 financial year will see the first increase in tonnages in 5 years, albeit a small increment of a few million tonnes. But this is significantly improved on the predicted 10 million tonne reduction in volumes before the new leadership team took over. While much research is needed to confirm the contents of the network statement are investable, with public consultations coming, we need to congratulate Transnet on both the watershed moment its release represents, as well as in the steps taken to practically implement the vertical separation of Transnet Freight Rail into Transnet Infrastructure Manager, or TRIM, and Transnet Financial Rail Operating Company, or TFROG. We look forward to the future creation of the independent infrastructure owner as contemplated by National Rail Policy. In ARIA, we have welcomed Transnet back onto the board of ARIA. It comes at a time when business has also noted the openness in which the new Transnet leadership is engaging with the National Logistics Crisis Committee, the interim regulator, and other industry bodies. It is a huge credit to Michelle Phillips and Russell Bikes that their appointments were celebrated in the industry. The challenges that Transnet face are not the product of today. We need to recognize that these challenges cannot be resolved in the short term. The massive underinvestment into maintenance has meant the network is now in poor condition. The Transnet debt burden means that operating cash flows need to be allocated to debt service costs instead of repairs or maintenance, let alone modernization and growth. The massive South African network, where 35% of our network moves just 1% of the country's rail freight volumes, adds operating costs to an already overburdened organization. Finally, the inflexibility imposed by the Public Finance Management Act on Transnet removes the ability for the organization to achieve much of the operating and agility enjoyed by the private sector. As an industry, we spent the last 3 years focusing on policies, regulations, and legislation to chart a way through the gathering storm. Now our national attention needs to move to the recovery of the SOEs and fundamental to this is the effective implementation of our reform agenda. Section 1.5.4 of the Freight Logistics Roadmap says our network should be rationalized. 35% of our network, moving 1% of our freight, is simply not sustainable. Network rationalization is now an obvious need and should be implemented. The Transnet balance sheet is overburdened. The so-called state capture debt, for which Transnet has very little to show, sits at a staggering approximate 60 billion rand. The restructuring of the Transnet balance sheet seems an inevitable step towards recovery. An exemption from the Public Finance Management Act, as has successfully been granted to entities like Telkom, should be carefully considered and then implemented. Our industry has existed worldwide for more than 2 centuries, and for all of that time, the huge capital cost nature of this industry has meant that true success has been founded on doing more with less. To do this, we need real efficiency. But for efficiency, we need high quality infrastructure. Unfortunately, in South Africa today, the reality of a decade of underinvestment and maintenance means our physical track infrastructure requires significant investment. In light of fiscal constraints, government policy has proposed that the private sector's approach to uplift the condition of the national network. The Freight Logistics Roadmap sets out that, taking into account current fiscal constraints, private sector funding will also need to be leveraged to a significant degree to improve the performance of the rail system. Transnet balance sheet limits its ability to invest, and partnerships are required to fund specific capacity expansion and operational improvements. Concessioning of network segments has the potential to bring in substantial private sector financing to reinvigorate the rail sector and strengthen Transnet's balance sheet, while retaining public ownership of the railway infrastructure. These concessions need to be brought to the market with urgency. In the general freight market, where rail and road compete in price, it is likely that the private sector investment into trains will be significantly undermined by the operating risk and inefficiency that result from poor track conditions. The PSP framework calls for the implementation of a PSP unit in the Department of Transport, taking learnings from the successful National Treasury PPP unit and similar successes in the REAP program. The effective capacitation of the rail PSP unit will be pivotal to the successful implementation of rail reform, especially those projects that relate to the upliftment of track conditions and future concessions. The year ended 2024 was a great year for the association under the stewardship of Mr. Klapel. Highlights include the development of a third-party access pilot project with Mondi, which could prove to be the first third-party access project in the country, the active participation in the NLCC, the welcoming back of Transnet as a member to the board of ARIA, representation of the South African rail industry at various forums and conferences in South Africa and abroad, inputs to the various policy papers of government in support of the reform agenda, support for the rail working group over the implementation of the Luxembourg Protocol, and the brave and tireless advocacy in support of the implementation of national rail policy and the rail reform agenda. In the year ahead, with the publishing of the network statement, the association will work closely with members to ensure their views are heard. The association will ensure that the principles enshrined in national rail policy are embedded in the network statement, and most importantly, that it is a document that practically translates to investment into trains. Equally, through the MOU with the Department of Transport, the association will support the implementation of the vital rail economic regulatory function under the new transport economic regulator. The association will equally support Transnet under its membership with its recovery plan and reform implementation. On the ground, we will continue to support members with procurement challenges that policies like as and when and payment delays present to them. Following the formal enactment of the Luxembourg Rail Protocol, ARIA will support government and the rail working group with its imminent adoption in South Africa. This will have significant benefits for the funding of rolling stock investment in future in South Africa. In closing, as we formally now mark what should be the turning of the tide, of the rail industry's prospects in South Africa, we need to remember that the rail industry only exists because there is an upstream economy. As a friend recently reminded me, the time to put a stent in your arteries is when your heart is still beating. In the railways, a large, diverse, and successful upstream freight economy is our heart. That heart employs 16 million people in the main economy. Economies with efficient and cost-effective logistics infrastructure are competitive and grow and thrive. In South Africa, we have the policies that set the path now to achieving this. The successful implementation of these policies will result in that most precious and elusive ideal of sustained and inclusive growth. So thanks for that. I'll then move on to, so that's as the association, I guess, is where we see the position of the industry at the moment. We do believe we're at a very important inflection point, and an inflection point, I can say, for the better, which is something I didn't have the luxury of saying in the last few years. So it's a great pleasure that I introduce Michelle Phillips, who's giving our keynote address. We can't overemphasize how good it is to see that we are expecting an increase in volumes from Transnet in the coming year, turning against the decline of the last 6 years. The openness with which the new Transnet leadership has approached business is also extremely refreshing. Michelle, congratulations on your appointment, and thank you very much for joining us today.
My apologies, I'm just trying to get my camera sorted.
Presentation is visible, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm just trying to sort out my camera, but in the meantime, while we're busy, thank you very much, James and colleagues, the ARIA colleagues. It is indeed an honor for me to be here today to address all of you. If you can give me 1 minute, we may need to change devices, but we will sort that out now. I'm having a technical problem, unfortunately. Good morning, everyone. Again, my apologies. Not a good introduction for the new GCE of Transnet. It's unfortunate that technology disappoints us when we least expected. Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Thank you so much. Harry, good to see you after a very long time. Colleagues, again, as I've said, I'm deeply honored to be here with you today to deliver this keynote address. I think many of you have known me. I've seen the names of the people that are present here today. I do want to take this opportunity to thank all of you, certainly for the support that has been afforded to the Transnet leadership in the recent past, and also all the messages of support that has come through for myself, Russell in particular. We all depend on him and on his team. And as well as the rest of the Transnet leadership, as well as for the Transnet board. We'll go to the next slide because I think I'll get straight into it. There's quite a bit I think that I would want to discuss with you and to share with you. James makes some very important points. So what we've done, I've tried to separate or structure this presentation in such a way that not only do you get to know Transnet better, because I think it is important that, with everyone having quite a lot justifiably to say about Transnet, I think it is also important that everybody understands, what she is made up of, right? So Transnet, as you all may be aware, consists of 6 operating divisions mainly. You see there the revenue contributions or what we expect from these various operating divisions. And all of them, in fact, serves to support the logistics system of the country. If we have all of these operating divisions working in an integrated manner and in an optimal manner, one should find that I'm going to the other device now. Then one should find that this system should operate with the efficiency that the country deserves.
Michelle, if you just can unmute again.
Michelle, we've lost your audio.
Hello.
Okay, we've got you back.
Things are not on my side today. Okay, so let's start again then. What you have on the screen right now is our attempt to share with you what is Transnet. Transnet has 6 operating divisions, and of course these operating divisions are expected to work together in an integrated manner so that we are able to provide the country with this efficient logistics system that everybody aspires to, this integrated system that we all look for. I see there's a question, where is PRASA? PRASA is not a part of Transnet. PRASA is a separate state-owned company. And once again, it's for those reasons that I thought it is necessary that I share with you, the organization that I represent and that I've been given the honor of serving as the Group Chief Executive. So you see the contributions of each of these divisions: Transnet Freight Rail, Transnet Engineering, Transnet National Ports Authority, Transnet Port Terminals, Transnet Pipelines, where I used to be, my former operating division, and of course Transnet Property. Transnet Property, important for us particularly where they manage core properties that are expected to assist us in the enablement of the movement of volumes on rail. And of course, you see we've placed the transit freight rail and transit engineering next to each other, because if these two operating divisions are not supporting each other, you find the impact that you see when it comes to suboptimal performance due to lack of all sorts of things, be it equipment, rolling stock, etc. So what is our mandate? I think in short, it is to ensure, if I can put it in a few words, and we all talk about this, it's about lowering the cost of logistics in the country. It's making it cheaper for people to be able to do business with us. James mentioned earlier, the negative impact that we have had on businesses in the country. I would like to state up front, I'm quite excited about where we are going. We understand and we appreciate the impact that we have on the economy. We are supposed to be doing all the good things. We are supposed to be facilitating industrialization. We are supposed to be facilitating trade. We are here to enable the industry, to ensure that there's growth in the industry and in the country, to ensure that we are able to crowd in private sector investments and capital, so that we are able to do this, more efficiently. It's always better to do it with other people's money, I think, and that's one of the reasons why we've been spending a lot of time with private business and with funders to see how we can better invest in Transnet. And of course, as a country, we want to be able to compete globally. We want global businesses to come and invest in our country, to set up factories. I always say that if we really want to ensure real growth in our country, it comes from making things or manufacturing and that sector. And really for Transnet, as we move forward, we will try to share with you, what we believe the pathways are for us to be, in fact, delivering on the Transnet mandate. Shall we go to the next slide? So why am I here? Specifically, I think the brief was, yes, come and deliver this keynote address. We want you to come and talk about the freight logistics roadmap. Everybody is so excited about what is happening, the reform and the transformation of the industry. Please come and talk to us and tell us what it is that Transnet is doing, and also an indication of what government is aspiring to do. So as James indicated earlier, clearly the national freight logistics system in South Africa is described as being in crisis. It has been declining over a number of years. On the right there, you see how these trends are moving downwards, completely in the wrong direction. We've seen the rail volumes going in the wrong direction. We've seen road volumes increasing. And we've seen a decline in our port performance. Now, why is that? And what is it that has driven this decline? We've done a number of diagnostics, and there's probably, this list is not exhaustive, but certainly if we were to prioritize when it comes to possible causes, we think of, and James mentioned this earlier, historical underinvestment in maintenance. Inadequate funding, definitely, poor implementation, and we take ownership in respect of how we've implemented, diversion of resources. Resources may be going in a direction where it's not supposed to go, and then resulting in an impact in our operations. Security issues has been a major concern over the past few years. I have now experienced this firsthand, both in our rail sector, as well as in the pipeline industry. As a country, I am firmly of the belief that we all, private business, our funders, law enforcement, we all have to work together to resolve the security issues in our country. This is not a Transnet problem. We feel it. I think not only do we feel it, but our customers feel it more. And in all aspects, in all areas of our country, we are seeing security issues that needs to be dealt with. And really, for me, I think that innovation and activities that seeks to address the security matters and the protection of the infrastructure is something that we all need to work together to address. I have to say, again, a word of appreciation to our customers who have come to the party to assist us, particularly if I can single out the coal line, to assist us in resolving some of the security issues on some of our, corridors. I maintain, and I say this to all my people, if we have an interruption in the line, it means that we don't move volumes. And we have to ensure that volumes are moving in an uninterrupted way and that it is not disturbed. And that really needs to be the focus for all of us, but particularly, I understand, as the custodian for Transnet. We see unfunded mandates. Yes, we are a state-owned enterprise. There are certain developmental or social developmental requirements or mandates that we have, and sometimes these are not sufficiently funded. Again, it leads to a diversion of very limited resources from our core, which is ensuring that operations run efficiently. Governance, I've often engaged with a number of our customers, with various institutions, to indicate to them, some of the constraints that one is under as a state-owned enterprise. However, again, we see this, and I'll talk to you about the progress that we've made in this area. But of course, the legacy of state capture and how that has impacted, resulting in increased governance requirements, yes, may be justified. However, maybe not to the best for us when it comes to doing what we need to do as Transnet. Rolling stock remains an issue. You all would be aware of the long-standing locomotives. We continue to see how we can make some inroads into getting locomotives and rolling stocks out of our workshops. And of course, as you see, we have an aging fleet, not only on the rail side, but also particularly our customers on the port side would have felt it firsthand, a fleet that is largely beyond its lifespan, and a lot of work that we are doing currently to ensure that we get the efficiencies up. Apologies. And then again, for me, what is very important, the issue of operational inefficiency and how do we address this? So yes, you would have seen in the papers, we've made the news for all the wrong reasons: operational inefficiency, comparisons to international benchmarks. When it comes to our rail system, the fact that we are moving too little traffic, that we are moving it too slowly, and that we are moving it suboptimally. And again, these are the factors. We own it. It has led to a number of the innovations and efficiency improvements as we move forward in recovering. But also, it has brought really to us to the point where there's an absolute need then for transformation and for a reform of the industry. We go to the next slide. So why the freight logistics roadmap? It finds itself within a number of, shall we say, documents. There's a pathway that has been developed by government. They've developed this freight logistics roadmap. And I think it's a deliberate and very focused intervention. And it's there for a very specific purpose. And as Transnet, we have to ensure the implementation and the execution of this freight logistics roadmap. So, I think government, let's give the credit where it's due. Government, together with the industry, and there's, I think, quite a few people who have provided input into the document, has ensured that we now have a deliberate and a focused intervention to improve the performance of this national logistics system, and to reverse the decline in the performance. Now, against this background, we know the freight logistics roadmap was considered, and it was approved for publication by Cabinet on the 8th of December. And there are a number of statements that I think are important for us to be aware of, that seeks to explain the purpose. So the roadmap is exactly what its name suggests. It is a pathway to address the immediate challenges in the logistics system, and of course to reform the system in the long term. The national freight system is challenged. It has stunted economic growth and job creation, particularly in the mining and in the manufacturing sectors, and they felt it, and I think, as I've said, ensuring the implementation of this roadmap is intended to address all of these. Stabilizing the operational performance is important. That's the immediate priority, and towards the end of the presentation, I will speak to you about the progress that we've made as Transnet in stabilizing the system. In the short term, of course, the implementation mechanism of the freight logistics roadmap will oversee operations improvement through 5 corridors. We have fully aligned the board-approved recovery plan with the freight logistics roadmap. We have identified both short and medium-term actions to improve the operations and, of course, to stabilize Transnet's finances to ensure sustainability going forward. So, when you look at this a particular slide, it speaks to all of these either existing or future policies. Where does this freight logistics roadmap find itself? How did we get here? And there are a number of documents. I'm not going to go through the contents of each of them. I'm going to, highlight a few of the areas that I think may be important. So the logistics roadmap has a very specific role. As I've said, it outlines that pathway. And when we look at various documents that have existed over the years and that continue to exist, that we are still, I think, trying to implement, all of this comes now to a head with the freight logistics roadmap. The National Freight Logistics Strategy, which was put in place in 2005, sets out a framework to address the challenges and to affect, areas of the freight system. Then we have the National Rail Policy of 2002 that outlines land transport and indicates the path of reforms. We have the National Commercial Ports Policy from 2002, which essentially, led to the vertical separation, or the what we called back in the day the divisionalization of Portnet into Transnet Port Authority and the Transnet Port Terminals as you know them today. Now, Parliament has passed legislation to support the transport policy, and the freight logistics roadmap is the instrument that has been identified to realize these policy goals. The white paper on national rail policy that was approved by Cabinet in March 2022. The policy introduces, of course, structural reforms into the rail sector, once again to enable and facilitate opportunities for the private sector to invest, for optimal utilization of rail, and then effective economic regulation of the rail to enable, again, we come back to equitable access to the rail network and maintenance. So all of this, as I said, comes together in this roadmap or pathway. ARIA often speaks of, and I think as part of their mandates, they talk about, making use of third-party rail access to benefit the South African economy. When they invited us to the session, that was made very clear, and of course in alignment and consistent with this national rail this national rail policy. So the essence of the rail policy is therefore it's to liberalize the rail sector. Yes, regulating rail infrastructure and providing private train operating companies with access to the freight rail network. So overall, in the transport policy, the aim is to put an end to natural monopolies in both the railways and the ports. And as Transnet, we have embraced the freight logistics roadmap as the instrument to implement these reforms. And as we go through the presentation, I will speak to you about the progress in respect of our implementation of the freight logistics roadmap. We can go to the next slide. And I think we will make this available to everyone at some point. So what is our understanding of these reform principles? So there's broad recognition, of course, that the rail network and the national ports these are national assets, and they need to be managed as national assets to maximize the social benefits, right? We are here to serve the country. We are here, we talk about a better life for all. You know, we talk about job creation. So, you know, these are the things that we need to ensure happens. So, as I've indicated, our understanding, yes, we need to maximize profits and ensure that we have an efficient and well-maintained asset that is able to move volumes and maximize the movement of volumes on the network. We speak of a competitive neutrality framework for state-owned firms in competitive markets. We understand that state ownership can sometimes distort market conditions and decrease sectoral efficiency. And of course, we now see that there is a clear path to ensure some kind of a level competitive playing fields in the rail and ports environment. You know, there's often been talk that as Transnet, we are averse to competition. We fully understand that competition will enable or is a tool to achieve efficiency, and we think that that is necessary. Our public service obligations are clearly defined and monitored and separately funded. Where those are in place, the state understands the true cost of these obligations and has to ensure that we are adequately funded and that performance is monitored as it should be. And of course, the facilitation of private investment and access to public and private infrastructure will be mandatory. And this is really the reform principles that is what Transnet understands is now being, we would want to exploit out of the freight logistics roadmap. We go to the next slide. So as Transnet, we followed, of course, a very specific approach in our response to rail reform. As I've indicated, the National Rail Policy of 2022 you know, presents us with an opportunity to reposition and to revitalize the rail sector for South Africa. There is ongoing, you'll see at the bottom there, we speak of collaboration. Collaboration has been key. It continues to be key, and it will continue to be key as we move forward. You know, this is why we are engaging with institutions such as ARIA, with various chambers, and engaging with all of our stakeholders across the board. When you look at the structures that have formally been put in place by government and through the presidency, we speak of Operation Vulindlela. This is the joint initiative by the presidency and the National Treasury to accelerate the implementation of these reforms in support of the economic recovery. Operation Vulindlela, I think you'll be aware, aims to modernize and transform the industry. It's looking at a large spectrum of things. You know, we're sitting at the moment at the National Logistics Crisis Committee, which really, I think, came out of also the National Energy Crisis Committee, and a lot of lessons that have been learned there. And now we are able to sit jointly to speak about, you know, those areas of particular concern to government and to state-owned companies, and how it is that we need to address and fast-track interventions to ensure that we are able to, again, live up to the mandate that we have promised to the country. So National Logistics Crisis Committee, made up of, representative from business, the presidency, or government departments that are relevant, the law enforcement, so that we are able to implement urgent interventions, and whilst at the same time looking in parallel at the reform agenda, so that the longer term implications are not lost, and that everybody understands that we are very firm in opening access and allowing access to our network. We go to the next slide. So what have we done to date? And this seeks to, people always say state-owned enterprises, you guys are too slow, you're not working fast enough. I'd like to say that continue to judge us on the performance going forward. I think that the feedback is important. It keeps us on our toes. For me, it's very important that we move with speed, and we are trying our best to do this. We have put in place all sorts of structures to ensure that we, of course, learn lessons from, I suppose, how things were done in the past, so that we do not repeat those mistakes. But then at the same time, we want to be able to, together with government and business, be able to come to the market with quality opportunities for the private sector to engage with us on. So what have we done thus far? One, as we work towards the separation of the infrastructure manager or from the operations, you'll see that we are working on the accounting separation. As we publish the network statement and the draft tariff methodology, I think as you read those documents, you'll understand why these are important. So the commercial separation is important between network and operations. We are in the process right now of completing that separation. We've completed the initial mapping of all of the assets and the infrastructure. So there's almost a complete separation in terms of that. On the operation side, they know what they own and what the assets are. And then on the infrastructure side, they understand what it is that they are responsible for. And the financial statements, as we indicate there, have now been successfully completed, the separation of those between network and operation. Yes, there's still some, I think, systems work that need to be done. But I think it is an achievement for at least for us to be able to see quite clearly, what belongs in the infrastructure manager and what belongs within the operations. The establishment of the infrastructure manager, we had gone to the market, I think, probably about a year or two ago, and indicated that this would be established in October 2023, and that we would appoint an acting infrastructure manager. I am pleased to say that we were able to communicate to the industry that we had successfully done that. So we had established the interim infrastructure manager, and we also appointed, I think you'll know, Besi Mabunda as the interim or the acting infrastructure manager. Through that, we have also then initiated the process of refining the design of that organization. We are consulting with labor on a daily basis, on a regular basis, so that we also ensure that we put the necessary change management processes in place. We have developed a multi-tier rail network. We've classified the network into specific segments, so that we are able to also identify, the economic network and those areas where we may be struggling, that's maybe not as dense as the others. And we've very, very nicely, the team has classified that, and I think that's also indicated in the network statement. Then you would be aware of the publication of the draft network statement. Again, it is a draft network statement, And I think yesterday it was published for, well, we published it on Friday. The process of public consultation will now be managed through the ARIA. They will be conducting the consultations across the country. I think that now is the time for everybody to participate, to make their voices heard, so that at the end of the day, a document, the ARIA is able to, to finalize a document that works for the country and works for all stakeholders that want to be part of this, I think, a very exciting time that we are in. So we hope that that's going to proceed and that will work well, and we'll let the ARIA manage that process. Then we have proceeded with the separation, well, not the separation, the corporatization of the Transnational Port Authority, the establishment as a subsidiary. The minister appointed an inaugural board in October last year. There's been quite a lot of progress that has been done in this area to establish the TNPA as a 100% Transnet-owned subsidiary. And as we move forward with the various processes and go through the various gates, we will continue to, take the market and our customers into our confidence and continue to provide information as we move forward. And then, of course, very important, and I think, on everyone's mind is the whole matter of private sector participation, transactions that we would be either are in the market already or that we will be going into the market with to crowd in private sector investment to see how we can, crowd in not only the funding but also skills and know-how to ensure that we have an efficient and effective logistics system. So I think in respect of specific ones that I would want to highlight, you recall that we had announced last year the preferred bidder for the equity, for the 49% share in DCT Pier 2 that is supposed to extend over a 25-year period. Just recently, I think a week or two ago, we announced after the due diligence process that the ICTSI is now the successful bidder. We are continuing to now proceed with a number of the non-financial matters that need to be finalized. Some of those, if I could mention one or two, is the exemption from the PFMA. I think it stands to reason that it does not make sense for us to establish a new co in partnership with government and then, we have it subject to the same kind of constraints that we ourselves have been complaining about. So the PFMA exemption application is underway, as well as we are continuing to engage with Labour. We've put together a Section 197 agreement that requires their signature, essentially an agreement that speaks to the employees remaining Transnet employees and that they would be seconded into this new co that is to be established. And that's where we are. Essentially, we are working towards financial closure. I think I can say, and we have communicated to the industry, that we do sit now with a situation where there is a challenge from another bidder. So we will allow the court process to proceed and to advise on that matter going forward. Then there's a Transnet-Sasol partnership. You'll be aware of, we went to the market in terms of the ammonia tankers, and that's also a partnership that we are quite proud of. And then we've identified several others that we want to move forward with across the ports, the property, and the rail segment, and we'll be going to the market in terms of not only communicating those to everybody, but also, when I say go to market, procurement processes will be underway for us to address that. We go to the next slide. I'm worried about my time and maybe over it, so I'm going to be quick. I've spoken to you about the network statement. Again, a major milestone for rail reform, the first of its kind. We are, I think, as James said, about time. And thank you very much for the congratulations. Let's hope that everybody consults respectfully, and that we provide the necessary input. Ultimately, this is everyone's document. We have done a lot of the work purely to let me say kick it off. Now it's time for everybody to comment as they would want, and then the ARIA will deal with those public comments. The tariff methodology, yes, I've heard that a number of people have had a number of concerns about the costs and how we've calculated and all sorts of things. Again, I want to say this is a draft methodology. It has a number of dependencies. Transnet has been, these are the costs that Transnet has been incurring in respect of this network. So in fact, we've been paying for it. In other jurisdictions, it is supported by government. And I think we are moving in that direction. It is important that people take it from whence it comes. This is not Transnet trying to increase its revenues. It's an indication of what it costs to run this network. And we expect everybody to interrogate it, engage with it, and use the platforms that have been provided by ARIA to comment on these. It was published yesterday in the Government Gazette with the process, and I think ARIA will indicate where they will be and when. And my request is that everybody channel the comments through the formal processes and take it from there. We'll go to the next slide. I'm going to move quite fast through the next. So all of these, some of the other initiatives that complement the outcomes, what we have done is establish operational excellence centers. You'll note that I've been, and as I go through where we are on our recovery plan, we'll see that I've been quite clear that we need to focus on operations. We need to, the only way we can do that is that we are watching these corridors all of the time, ensuring that there are no disruptions, and we do that through these operations excellence. We used to call them war rooms in the past. We decided that that's not a good name, and we'd rather call them operations excellence centers. We've collaboration with stakeholders, important, and that will continue as we move forward through the NRCC. Again, we've piloted quite a number of things through RBCT, and we're very grateful for their assistance, and we have continued to roll these mutual cooperation agreements that we have to our other customers. Again, identification and application of those key performance levers. Focus on the things that does the job. Focus on the levers. Focus on that which moves the goal at in the shortest possible time and gets it to the right place. We are ensuring that we transfer skills to our people, but focus again, performance. We are working on ensuring a high performance culture within the organization. And, I have to say that with my background and from where I come from, those are the things that we will continue to do because we're a throughput organization. We only make money if we move volumes. Security incidents, I've spoken to you about, very important that we protect the network and that we don't allow organized crime, organized criminals, wherever they may be, to prevent us from ensuring that we are able to provide a better life for all South Africans. We go to the next slide. So again, we're looking forward to the complete establishment of TRIM. I've shared with you where we are. We want to see this as a wholly owned subsidiary. We'll see what government decides for us as we move forward. In the meantime, this is what we are working on as Transnet. We want to operationalize the third-party access, working very hard to ensure that over the next few weeks and months that we are able to provide the necessary access and that the application process can commence. And then, of course, we understand that private sector may not be as ready as they would like to be in terms of equipment that they would want to use on this network. And we we have also proceeded with the establishment of a leasing company, wherein we want to place our fleet that could be refurbished together with a private sector partner and make that available to third parties and even Transnet for use on this network. So we are looking at various PSP mechanisms, transactions that will attract interested parties to continue to work with us and to invest in our business. And then, as I've said, we continue with the performance recovery. We have seen an uptick. We believe that we have stabilized this business, and the focus certainly for the next financial year is to start with a high, and then as we move forward to end on a high. Next slide, Esther. So on the recovery plan, I think I've shared this with you. I'm not going to go through too much details, but it was very important for us to immediately stop the bleeding. We wanted to immediately optimize our business, fix what we think we can do immediately, look at the low-hanging fruit, and see how we can stabilize very quickly. What National Treasury has done, and this is how we've also aligned our recovery plan to the freight logistics roadmap. You recall the Minister of Finance was quite clear that Transnet will not receive any cash injection or financial support if it does not align with the freight logistics roadmap. We're grateful for the guarantee that's been granted to us, and we're working with speed to ensure that we implement the requirements of the freight logistics roadmap, and in that way also then comply with the conditions that government has placed on us, when they provided us with the guarantee in December. So the transformation, you should be aware of that. I mean, this is things that I've been speaking to up until now. How do we position also Transnet going forward? And then, at the end of the day, it all comes down to enabling the South African economy. We want to be sustainable, we want to be productive, and we want to enhance competition. We need to improve efficiency and ensure that, we invest accordingly, that our people perform, and that we get to address, the current challenges that we experience in our business. You go to the next slide. So also, not to go through this, I often share this, but it's again to show the industry that it's about overall operational excellence. Our focus is on operational execution, and all of these items, that are or enablers are expected to work in an integrated manner to ensure that we improve efficiencies, improve reliability, that we become once more a confident player, and that our customers' expectations are not only met, but in fact exceeded. We go to the next slide. I think we can move of this because it really shows the, the three pillars. But yeah, so James, you talked about this number, and I thought it was important to share as we move to the end of this financial year. If Transnet had done nothing and had continued on the trend where we were in October of last year, the numbers tell us that we would have ended up around, and I mean, it's between a 139 to a 142 number. With the interventions, and as I've said, very focused interventions that have been put in place, we are seeing ourselves ending this financial year between the 150, 152 number. We know we had promised a 154 million ton number. But, I have to say, with all of the work, we're continuing to work very hard. And we will work, and we work every minute of every day, every week. We watch these numbers to see what the teams are doing. Russell and his team, together with Jabo and the team, they're trying to address these things as they arise, so that if there's an interruption, we are able to recover with speed, because we cannot afford to lose any more volumes. We were very nicely on track towards the 154. And then I think, as you know, in early January, we had that rather big derailment on the coal line. And we also had, I think, 2 derailments on the ore line. And, that's where we move probably the biggest numbers. I mean, on that incident on the coal line, we lost about 1 million tons in that 1 week. But fortunately, with the assistance of the industry, RBCT and the customers, we were able to get that line up and running in record time. People were working day and night, and we were able to get back and move again. And since that derailment, we had actually moved the highest volume, which was a 3.4 million ton, which was the highest in the last year. So we continue to move and we continue to push and we continue to encourage and motivate our people, to do what is not only in our interest, but in the interest of the economy and our citizens at large. The next slide. This next slide again, and we'll share this. It speaks of the highlights. I've already discussed all of this with you. I'm going to end it here. We have seen, I think maybe to see, yes, these are the kind of things that we want to share with our customers going forward. We will continue to be, certainly as part of my leadership of this organization, is to ensure that Transnet remains open. It is a state-owned company. We cannot close her doors. We will be open and we will be as transparent as we possibly can with the industry. We will continue to knock on your doors for assistance and for support. And, we hope that you will continue to support us as we take Transnet into a sustainable future. We believe that we are at the end of this financial year. If we are able to implement, and I believe that we will, certainly on my side, there's a real push to ensure that and our chairman is very clear, do what you say you will do. Our people are being managed in terms of their performance. We believe that we will get very close to the target for this financial year end. We believe that on the revenue side, we will also, the loss that we had forecasted, I think it will still be a loss, but it will be a better loss, if I could call it that, if those are the words. And we believe that over the next year, if we intervene and we do the things that we say we will do, that the industry can expect a much better looking Transnet and much better financial results at the end of 24-25. Thank you very much, James. I would like to end it there.
Thank you so much. It's really so refreshing to hear what you have to say, and the honesty and transparency with that you're approaching this is really, really refreshing. There's a comment that Deepak has just loaded, and he says this, which I think is sort of bears out what I say, is there's a general sense of optimism in the face of great challenges in rail. The constructive attitude and transparency of current leadership is very encouraging. It's re-established and strengthened the collaboration with supporting associations, regulatory bodies, supplier partnership to optimize the entire transport system for South Africa. And, I think that really is testament to the way that you are approaching this. So thank you for that. It is very much appreciated. I also really like what you had to say about the growing volumes, because, at the end of the day, we can talk a lot about policies and procedures and different approaches and crisis committees and everything, but the ultimate benchmark is volumes. It's how many trains we have on the network and how much volume we move. And, to see the turning of that tide is just so fundamentally important. I've got a lot of questions. I'm sure other people do too. But I think in the interest of time, I thank you sincerely for your time today. And we really look forward to engaging you further in future. If I can move on into the presentation of Cyprian Marawa. Cyprian is the Head of Transport, Logistics and Bulk Water Services at the Development Bank of South Africa. One of the biggest challenges that railways face, both in South Africa and regionally, is the availability of funds. And when you're looking at an industry like ours, which is infrastructure type assets, we need really long dated finance and long dated debt in order to get projects away. And development finance institutions are really fundamental, ultimately, to the success of finding financial feasibility and bankability in the projects that the railway industry is busy with and trying to roll out both in South Africa and across the continent. Cyprian is going to tell us about the role of DBSA in catalyzing railway development for Africa's prosperity in this moment. I think in the rollout of reform, both in South Africa and of course, we've seen reform rolled out regionally in most of our trading, in almost all of our trading partners. It couldn't be more relevant. So Cyprian, thank you very much for joining us today, and we're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you, James. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Great. Do I project from my slides, or it's from yourselves there? So I should share the screen.
You can choose. You want me to do it for you? It's fine.
Yeah, please go ahead. If you can do it for me, I'll signal when to move to the next slide. Thank you, James.
You're welcome.
Great. Good to go. Chairman James, on behalf of the DBSA CEO, Boitumelo, the executives, and I would like to say thank you for inviting the bank to be with ARIA today, and also thank you to the ARIA membership, ARIA staff members, and our partners who are here. I'm proud to say Transnet is one of our biggest partners. So I was quite excited that you spoke efficiencies, you spoke collaboration. These are the very, themes that drive us. You see that in our picture there. I don't know, it's not very clear, but I hope everybody can see. It's not just rail, because rail they lead to ports, and roads fit into rails. So we always take an integrated approach to what we do. We are a government-owned bank. Next slide, please. And as a government-owned bank, next slide, please. Now, as a government-owned bank, we are actually 41 years this year. Our total assets stand at slightly over 100 billion. And the equity that comes from government and our own retained profits is around 45 billion as of year-end 2023. It's very, very important that I emphasize that transport, energy, ICT, water are key priority sectors wherein we are playing a role in terms of preparing infrastructure projects, financing and implementing them in sub-Saharan Africa. More importantly, and linked to efficiency, is really the fact that we are transparent and are externally rated. We think we're well governed because we have never had audit issues. And in support, or as verification that we seem to be one of the good guys around, is that we have global accreditations, which are very, very critical and part of our partnerships. And I'll talk a bit more around that because it's really the essence of why we're a DFI. So in short, our mandate is to ensure development through building infrastructure in chosen sectors. And transport is one of them that talks to railway. Next slide, please. Now, we cover quite a although initially we used to cover South Africa only, or in other words, look at projects in South Africa, we extended that mandate to cover SADC member countries, which are shown. And now we have gone beyond because Africa is one, and what we're trying to ensure is prosperity for the whole of Africa through development. And as you know, development is infrastructure. So yes, today we're talking rail, but the issue is really that we cover energy, transport, ICT, and other sectors, but predominantly energy and transport are the biggest books that we have. Next slide, please. Our mandate derives from national plans. So because our partner is government, we are owned by government, we have to unpack the national development plans. We also talk to regional plans like the SADC Infrastructure Vision of 2027. And similarly, we look at global plans as we unpack the sustained development goals and try and pick out from there what it is that we need to focus on in terms of financing or funding infrastructure projects. Next slide, please. Next two slides. The key aspect of our mandate, next one, please, is the partnerships we have. We have national partnerships with almost all banks. No, go back, please. We have national partnerships with our own government. One forward, please. And we work with other government departments that seek to build infrastructure, like the corporate government and traditional affairs, all the banks, research partners, university partners. We have regional partners like NEPAD, African Development Bank, and international partners like KfW and all the other multilateral banks that are out there. Of importance is the fact that we actually partner development banks in other member countries so that in the end, we might also get them to be accredited, and together in that collaboration, we do more. Next slide, please. In order to pursue our mandate, we look at the full value chain. So we look at all modes of transport, road, rail, water, air, pipelines, you name it. If it moves, if it flies, if it sells, it's fair game in those sectors or regions that we spoke about. We make a distinction, of course, whether it's core infrastructure or sub-core like vehicles. You have seen us fund, for example, locomotives, as well as the rail. An example which I'll share is our train, which DBSA was a part funder in it. So it entails a comprehensive follow through the value chain to identify infrastructure funding opportunities. So, and the ethos there is that you can't leave a project partially done. So you can't just build a road. You have to look at the bridges. You have to look at the things that will move in there on that road. Similarly with rail. So we take a full value chain view to infrastructure financing. Now, next slide, please. So let's go back to where we start. These are the development plans. Who crafts them? If I take an example of SADC, they know best what needs to be done, how many road projects, how many rail projects, right? We can even help them define the projects. That's what we do. And I'll talk a bit more about that. We then get an understanding of the bigger picture of what is the total investment required in a sector per annum. It's very important, that context, because that talks to development. We also look at the key conditions around what it is that we're looking at. For example, if it's rail, what are the traffic volumes, income? So there is a phase of unpacking whatever is going on. Importantly, next slide, please. Very, very importantly, we don't do this in isolation. We have to look at the global trends that impact on us. The key theme here is we know decarbonization is a key driver of what must happen in the railway sector or in the transport sector. Net zero is coming. So what role do we play? Whatever we now look at going forward, we really ask that we receive an investor's plans along those things. What are your plans on decarbonization, net zero? That's how we incorporate global developments into what we do. Next slide, please. Now, again, there are other themes that talk to not just drivers, but also from a solution perspective. And the important one here is that there is recently a huge amount of climate investment funds, which can be tapped specifically for the transport rail sector. We all know that in South Africa, transport sector is the third largest contaminant or emitter of greenhouse gases. So what is out there? That's our role. Remember that accreditation I spoke about? It talks to access to those funds. What does it mean? It's very, very important that you see us as a center of a network that pulls in what's happening around us for the benefit of the development of the region. This is a very, very important point. We achieved accreditation because we do things well. And guess what? We are now able to access concessionary funding from various climate investment funds, to the extent that we actually are now at facility, have signed facilities, which we then channel into various projects. If you wanted to electrify your trains or to green the networks, various aspects of it, these are the funds to use. They're concessionary, they bring efficiency into the port. And I think efficient operations go side by side with efficient funding. It is important that I explain how the bank raises its funding. There is no money coming from government to the bank so that we put into investment projects. That's not what happens. Because of its rating, DBSA, like some other state-owned enterprises, accesses the financial markets, European markets, local markets, bilaterals with other institutions, and funds like this. That's what we use for specific projects, concessionary funding, sometimes grants, but you can see we have an average cost of funds model that we apply here. Next slide, please. But still on plans, it's very, very important that we interpret and understand and speak to partners in collaboration. Next slide, please. In collaboration to fully really understand the key issues that these partners are having. So here, for example, again, looking at the SADC rail routes, with an understanding that just Africa requirements globally exceed 150 billion US dollars. That's huge. Now, in real terms, 80% or 75 to 80% of the network is within South Africa. So how do we collaborate to increase trade, to build elsewhere, and integrate into South Africa? We need to understand the issues. And there are experts at this that will tell you there's lack of maintenance. You have heard it from Michelle. There are capacity issues, delays across borders, skills, poor model integration, all sorts of issues come about. If you were to look at the aggregate requirement in 2016, the African Development Bank quantified that almost between 600 billion to 750 billion is required for projects in Africa. On an annual basis, there is a gap of 68 to 100 billion required. That's a tall order. What can DPSA do alone? Remember the partners we spoke about. And we are reaching out, but you can't reach out just to develop in South Africa. You have to develop in the region because that's where the trade happens. And that's where an integrated development happens. Next slide, please. Let's look at some of the key projects that we are aware of and we are a part of in the railway space. You're familiar with these, the Trans-Kalahari line. There's the Lobito corridor being developed. There's the Beria corridor. So this demonstrates our involvement in these projects for rail development purposes, but broader than rail as well. The defining of these projects is what we do. We fund that process. And when I engage and talk around what it is that we then do, having shared with you who we are, how we look at things, and where we look, you will then see our process. And I'll invite you to engage us and talk around rail and how we can catalyze development in undeveloped areas. Next slide, please. Even if we're to look within South Africa, like I said, Transnet is our partner, is our key partner. We work with them. This is a public document. You can see short-term initiatives, 18 of them. Look at the rail. This is a lot of money required, over 125 billion. This is in their financials. That's South Africa alone. When you include the region, it's even bigger. Bearing in mind that as a development finance institution, we really look at the long-term, 15, 20, 25 years pipeline of projects. Here is just a 5-year view by Transnet. But it's so important because somebody did a research and they said 60% of JSE listed entities are connected to Transnet somehow. So Transnet is the economy in our view. It is the one that will drive development because it's linked to trade of goods, it's linked to the interior, it's linked to the partners that we do and so forth. So you can see how we unpack things systematically to say, where are the projects? And that's my job, that's what I do. What is the new era like? Next slide, please. Now, I was really excited when that at the bottom there was published in the media. Transnet reviews when private trains should start using. That talks to new era. That talks to policy, that talks to collaboration. And from where we sit, we say, what else? What about smart rail infrastructure? Have you seen the Gautrain? What is the future of that? Similarly, we look at roads. There will be Uber trains soon. There's technology, there's tracking. There's all sorts of things that are happening in the railroad space. Then we engage investors, all sorts of investors, around collaboration, sizing what needs to be done, and get a detailed understanding of what it is that they want. What are the risk return issues? What do we need to intervene at? In what shape and form? And this is what I'm now going to talk about. By the way, before I move to policy is a double-edged sword. Just to digress very quickly, you saw how a lot of the SADC countries say to Elon Musk, you have to register in country for you to be an internet service provider. What did he do? He didn't like that policy, so he's beaming directly to our cell phones now. Sometimes policy creates a dangerous environment for, whoever is pushing that policy. But I don't think that's the case here. This is most welcome for Transnet, that we're now looking at a mind shift and a change. And Michelle spoke a lot about this. I want now to talk to you about how we catalyze through products and services. Exactly how do we do it? And this is where I invite you to engage us, because some of you are stakeholders and customers. So that I'm doing this so that you understand how we do it and how to approach us. Next 2 slides, please. Now, next one, please. Now, the very first issue is that there are a lot of projects out there, but they are not ready. Sorry, 1 slide back, please. A lot of projects are not ready. We have worked with Transnet on PSPs, and there is need to put money, early money, to shape, define, and clearly understand the dynamics of large projects. One of the things that we do as DBSA is to go in early at that stage and put in money so that we define projects. This is what we call project preparation. And by the way, we bring in money from partners, crowding in partners, and partners like DFIs who have an appetite for that early stage development of projects. When we do that, subject to certain terms and conditions, all we ask is that we play a role as a lead arranger in those projects, in terms of really saying, let's move on to implementation and let's move on to credit enhancements. You find all these catalytic aspects in DBSA. We project prepare, we can lead arrange, we collaborate with other partners, and we credit enhance. This is fundamental to what we do. And together with partners, next slide, please, we can give phenomenal access to projects, real projects or any projects, to third-party funds. Remember what I said earlier. If you are good and are seen to be transparent and are rated externally, you have access to a lot of third-party funds who are not present in South Africa or don't have the capacity to be here, but they say, okay, work with us on this. And here's a list of all the partners we've worked with before and we are still working on project funding. So here is how we move a project from planning, next slide, please, to maintenance. So it always starts with those big plans, but you get to project level plans. And those plans, you spend money, a little bit of money, 5 to 10% of project value can go into project preparation. So you plan, you prepare, or rather we plan, we prepare, we finance, we build, and we even maintain. you might be aware that there is a separate division within DBSA, and which is not investment, it's infrastructure delivery. It's an agency within DBSA. So if a state-owned enterprise, if government has a lump sum of money and they want to build schools, they come to that division and say, right, procure for us. So we procure efficiently. That's the build and maintain. So we've been able to build schools, clinics, hospitals under this program. We're actually trying to run with some state-owned enterprises to do the same, because we have expertise around building or procurement. But the main theme of the bank is to plan, prepare, and finance. There are various funds that we even use our profit, and we have different instruments that we have in order to move projects across rail, and we've done this with rail projects. The next slide, please, will show some of just the key principles around that kind of journey of a project. So we always say, we don't crowd out other banks. When things are not moving for some reason, it's too early for a project, we go in with the project sponsor and we say, let's co-fund this together. That's a principle. We must co-fund. Even at project level, we need other banks in. The only reason why we would have gone in early is to make sure that we catalyze. And from my chemistry days, catalysis is moving things a bit faster than they would normally. So we move that by planning and project preparation. Now, where we have grants, we give grants and we don't want the money back. And usually it's for really social infrastructure projects. But where it's non-grant funding, in other words, it's a borrowing even at that project preparation level, we push to achieve feasibility. If it's not feasible and we've done the studies together, we walk away. We put in money together with you. If it's not feasible, yeah, we walk away. But if it's feasible, we want the money back with a little bit of a retainer so that we do more next time. If it's proven feasible and you say, no, I don't want to do it now, we then say, please give us our money back so that we can do it for those that want to roll out projects. And we have done this with Transnet and other rail entities. Like I said earlier, we then arrange the funding and financing of that project. So we developed it, we're staying with it. We want to make sure that that infrastructure is built. That's where the lead arranger comes in. In fact, we always put in a bit of our money so that you can actually say the project is sort of partly funded upfront. And we are part of the project steering committee. Now, where have we done this? Where have we done this? Next slide, please. I'll talk briefly about projects before I open the floor for discussions. The North-South corridor and Beira corridors was where we played a role in putting in money, our own money and others people's money, to develop the projects along those corridors. The one that excites me, which is rail related, is on the next slide. You might be aware, next slide please, that there are developments about the Gautrain, both phase 1, concession 2, which starts in 2026, and then additional new rail, which is phase 2 in other areas. But not only we were part of phase 1, long time ago, but we were part of it. And here are some of the key projects which are catalytic. They talk to movement. Yes, it's not all rail, but this is an example of where we've played key roles in doing the feasibility studies, in being an MLA, and moving the project forward, making sure the infrastructure is done. So my key message to you is really that our doors are open. Look at us as a partner. We raise money quite efficiently because of our rating. And that talks to how we carry ourselves, our rating, and how others outside see us. We have access to funds from other people that are happy with the way we do things, and we are trying to move how we do our processes to other DFIs in other countries so that we do more in the region in infrastructure projects. So it is my view that there are interlinkages that we can't ignore. They talk to growth. Next slide, please. Investment, development, and ultimately regional integration. For success to happen, Africa's success, it's about partnerships, collaboration, and efficiency. Like we say, the DBSA, we're bending the arc of history towards a shared prosperity. Thank you very much. I hope I'll hear from some of the members.
Cyprian, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that. That was extremely insightful, and as I said in the beginning, so relevant for where we are at the moment. A couple of just a very practical question from my side is that, you know, in order for the rail sector to really succeed, we need density. And you know, for density, we need Transnet to succeed, and then we need a number of private operators to also come into South Africa. And it's you know, because the rail systems have these hugely high fixed costs. The more tons we see on the lines, the more successful you get, and then your success starts becoming self-fulfilling as you grow this density. And you know, for that to happen, we need to see a number of new entrants entering into the South African market, which I think is also very aligned to DBSA's developmental mandate. How do and I think this element that you discussed of pre-project financing or feasibility financing is so important, you know, in that context. How do people practically approach DBSA for these requests for pre-project financing?
Thank you, James. It's really as simple as this. When you have identified a project and you've done some form of desktop or pre-feasibility, you knock on our door and we discuss and understand the dynamics of that project. These are large infrastructure projects. These are projects that are of a very long tenure. And to your point, James, when there is no traffic, you don't walk away. You deploy the correct product. Traditionally, you put in equity 70-30 split. That assumes you have cash flows to cover the 70. What happens when you don't have? This is where we take concessional funding and put in the correct product in between, so that whilst you wait, I think this is one of the phrases I learned from Transnet. Putting capacity ahead of demand. It means putting in a suitable product whilst you wait for demand to pitch up. And that applies to rail, water, and a lot of large infrastructure projects. You talk to us about the correct capital structure for that project. So as a DFI, we will place a slot of the correct product there besides your equity and mezz and debt in order to put capacity, then the demand will pitch up. And to your point also, James, a lot of new players don't have money to come in and be part of the PSP projects. So DBSA has a policy and a mandate to give certain groups of people previously disadvantaged, to give them loans of a nature that they place and buy equity in new builds, in new developments. This is what we call BE funding. So if a black party is out there and they have the skills and are a suitable partner, say to a port operation, and they don't have the equity to put into the project, they knock on our door, we look at the project dynamics, and we can put that equity on their behalf for their hold into the project, for their shareholding into the project. That's BE funding for them. So we cover those aspects. it's a knock on the door. But do the homework first. Do the review, understand your project. We don't just put money. As you can see, project preparation can cost money, 5 to 10% of a project. Show that you have skin in the game. Do the research, understand the project dynamics. When you knock on our door, we can see that you really are keen on this, and we run with you. We co-fund with you the development of that project. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Cyprian, thank you very much. So I mean, I think should members reach out to you directly, and then you can refer them to across the team once they've got these that initial work done.
Absolutely.
Okay. Outstanding. Cyprian, thank you very much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. We are running a little bit over time, so I'll leave it there and then introduce and move on to our next speaker this morning, who is a very good friend of the association, Howard Rosen. Howard has worked tirelessly for the adoption of the Luxembourg Rail Protocol, and I have had the pleasure of the last few years of sitting on his International Management Committee for the adoption of the protocol. I'm very pleased to say that recently Howard was present for the formal adoption of the Luxembourg Rail Protocol and its enactment into force and effect. And I just wanted to congratulate you, Howard. Years and years of incredible hard work, and what a wonderful achievement that will reverberate for a very long time through creating efficiency into financing for our industry. So thank you and congratulations, and we're very much looking forward to what you have to say.
Jamie, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Yep.
Good. Okay. I suggest the easiest thing is perhaps, since the organization has my slides already, I just call for the use of the slides rather than sharing my screen. Hopefully that's okay. Otherwise, I'll share the screen. Brilliant. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Well, firstly, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be with you. I've just come back from Nairobi, exploring the possibilities of private finance for rolling stock there and the adoption of the Luxembourg Rail Protocol in Kenya. And as we will discuss very quickly, there are lots of things going on in South Africa, which I think is going to have a huge effect on the way that the rail industry works, particularly in the SATC area. But I was struck from our previous speaker, Cyprian, very impressive presentation. Thank you. I was struck about the fact that obviously finance is going to be the key to making these projects work. And the Luxembourg Rail Protocol is all to do with rolling stock, not about infrastructure. But it does make a difference, because if you make it easier for the private sector to come in and finance the rolling stock, then of course you take a burden off government, you take a burden off multilateral development banks, state-owned banks, and so on to support a project, because you know that the private sector can come in and provide their own finance. Now, some of you on this call I know very well, and you know me well, and you know all about the Luxembourg Rail Protocol, but not everyone. So forgive me if I just take a couple of seconds to go through what the protocol is, what it does very quickly, and then I want to analyse what the implications are, both for South Africa and beyond. So could we go to the first slide, please? Thank you. So the Luxembourg Rail Protocol, as hopefully some of you know, is an international treaty which is designed to make it easier and cheaper for the private sector to finance railway rolling stock. And it covers three types of security interests, which are created by secured funders. Firstly, where you are pledging an asset, a security for debt. Secondly, all types of leases, operating leases, financing leases. It could be a lease for one day, could be a lease for 30 years. And conditional sales. Conditional sales traditionally are vendor sales programs, manufacturers selling items, and in this case, rolling stock on credit, where the returns, the cash coming in will eventually pay for the cost of the asset, and then title passes. And the protocol is applicable when the debtor is in a contracting state. And we'll come back to that in a little while, because that's going to be rather important. Next slide, please. So what it does, particularly, it creates a whole system of rights, a global system. So it's a common set of rights applying in all the different countries that adopt the protocol. It particularly gives creditors rights on debtor default or lessee default or insolvency. And these rights are registrable through an international registry operating 24/7 through the internet. There are two big innovations that the protocol brings. One is the introduction of this international registry, public registry, fully accessible through the internet. And the second is that for the first time, it introduces a concept of a global, unique and permanent identification system for railway rolling stock, something that just doesn't exist at the moment. Next slide. It applies to all railway rolling stock, wherever manufactured, which means it's not just the classic locomotives and wagons, freight wagons, passenger wagons, but you can see a list there of all sorts of different equipment that's covered by the protocol. And what's important is that, firstly, there's no restriction on where the manufacturing position or place is for the rolling stock. Could be in South Africa, could be outside of South Africa, anywhere in the world. And secondly, it applies both to new and used equipment. So one of the considerations that funders are going to have in the future is how they use the Luxembourg Rail Protocol when they're refinancing existing equipment, not just financing new equipment. Next slide, please. This is just, can you see the slide? This is just a picture of some of the different assets. You'll see the How train there, but some of the different assets that are covered by the Luxembourg Protocol. I just want to make one thing very clear. On the right-hand side, that horse tram, the tram is covered by the protocol, but not the horse. So please take that into account, dear banks, when you're doing your financing or leasing. Next slide, please. So, as I said before, there are actually three major innovations. One is the international registry. Second is the introduction of this global unique identification system for all rolling stock. And the third innovation is that for the first time, we're going to have a set of minimum standards for the marking of rolling stock with that Orvis number, because it's essential that the Orvis number is essential for purposes of identifying the equipment, placing your interest on the international registry. But of course, it also has to be associated with the physical asset. And so we needed some rules to deal with that. Next slide, please. As Jamie mentioned before, the protocol is now in force. It came into force just under 2 weeks ago on International Women's Day on the 8th of March, and it represents a huge step forward for the way that the private sector can finance railway rolling stock around the world. What I said at the time when the decision was finally made to go forward on the 8th at the intergovernmental meeting was that, to quote Churchill, this is not the beginning of the end, but it's perhaps the end of the beginning. There's a lot more work to be done, but this is a critical step on actually creating a new international framework for private sector finance of rolling stock. Next slide. Current situation is that the supervisory authority, which looks over the way that the international registry works, it has now come into force. It's an intergovernmental organization. South Africa is represented on the supervisory authority already. The treaty itself has been ratified currently by 4 states, Spain, Luxembourg, Sweden, and Gabon, plus the European Union in respect of the areas that they cover. So not on behalf of all member states for everything. But there are some ratifications coming. The most important one, particularly for our discussion today, is that South Africa has more or less got to the point where it ratifies. We're through the National Assembly. We're now going to the Select Committee for the NCOP, and we're hopeful, maybe even quietly confident that this will get through before the election and therefore enable formally South Africa to present its instrument of ratification. And that's going to have a catalytic effect, to quote the previous speaker, on the way that rail finance works in the future. Because particularly in the SADC area, we know that there are other states watching once South Africa does, Namibia, Eswatini, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and so on. So once South Africa moves forward, that will have a huge impact on the way that the SAD states generally, and I would suggest also SARA will work with us to implement this system across the SADC region. Separately, there are many states that have already signed the protocol and are working towards ratification. The most obvious one to point out is the UK, which is arguably the largest private rail finance market in Europe, at least. And the draft of rail reform bill that was published a few weeks ago specifically looks at giving government power to ratify the protocol. So we're on our way in the UK, but it's not quite yet there. Next slide, please. What's important to note also from an African context, gradually both the African Union and the UN Economic Commission for Africa have bought into the way that the Luxembourg Rail Protocol will provide a valuable support for the development of both the African Continental Free Trade Area and also the whole system of the African Integrated Rail Network, which is projected through to 2063. Everybody now understands that it's all very well building the infrastructure, but if you don't have the rolling stock, it doesn't help. Therefore, we now see gradually more and more government buy-in at a very high level, the most obvious of which was the Zanzibar Declaration last September, where AU transport ministers specifically encouraged AU member states to move forward and adopt the Luxembourg Rail Protocol. Next slide, please. The International Registry is now functioning. It's been in operation since the 8th of March. You can go look at the website. There are also training videos up already how to use the International Registry. We hope and we sense that the system will take a little while for people to get used to, but once they get used to it, it'll be very simple. And it works with a very easy multi-factor authentication systems to ensure security. Next slide, please. This is what the first page of the website looks like. Next slide. These are the model rules which are now in operation, and there is a set of model rules that's been published by the United Nations, and we've also published a set of guidance notes just explaining some of the nuances of how the rules on marking work and dealing with some tricky issues like whether an articulated wagon is actually one or two items. Next slide, please. This is the minimum requirement. This is what it will look like. The plate will be minimum size 15 centimeters by 10, so not a big plate, but nonetheless sufficient to identify the rolling stock and will be attached permanently to the rolling stock. Next slide. So what are the benefits? Now let's look at the practicalities. It's all very well having an international treaty, but what does it really do for operators in South Africa, for example, including Transnet, including private operators? Well, firstly, it should deliver cheaper and easier private finance for rolling stock. That's because you're reducing the risk of the funder, and you're actually opening out possibilities to bring in additional funding coming from maybe foreign investors, institutional funders such as pension funds, who up until now have been a little bit reticent about coming into the market and now begin to see that there is a clear legal framework to protect the interest of their pensioners or investors, and therefore you broaden out the scope for finance and therefore obviously also bring down the cost because it's easier to attract finance in. What it also does is to facilitate what should be a win-win. We know that there's a lot of new technology out there, whether it's digital automated coupling, whether it's AI, hydrogen powered locomotives, all of these things and much more. All of these things are going to need a lot of investment. which will in due course generate benefits, but nonetheless you still need the capital up front. So the protocol, by encouraging more financiers to come in, will make it easier for the operators to be able to utilize that special area of development for the rail sector, and actually then realize the efficiencies that come from that. But there are very specific areas where we know that there's going to be a reduction in cost. For example, there are rules on banks as to how they take reserves, and they have to allocate capital against their loan books. The riskier that loan or lease is, the more difficult it is for them to finance, and they have to reserve more capital, which costs them money. So if you reduce the cost, then obviously you reduce the cost that comes out to the customer, because you reduce the cost of funds. And then obviously it provides a great deal of support for operators who are accessing operating lease models. Next slide, please. Now, I know time is short, and I won't go through this in enormous detail, but the bottom line is that the benefits here are that you can see it creates a lot more flexibility in the market, and it lowers the barriers to entry. Next slide, please. So what are the implications for South Africa and beyond? Well, clearly, it's going to be a critical tool in bringing more investment into the rail sector and creating the mechanism whereby new projects can be properly realized in the most efficient way. For example, even today, you look at railway lines, oftentimes you see that they're empty. They're not being utilized enough. Oftentimes the relationship of the investment in the rolling stock compared to the investment in the infrastructure is not quite right. And if we can invest more into rolling stock, offer more services, both private and public operators offering, particularly in freight, more services to the business community and beyond, that means that you use your infrastructure more efficiently. So it creates a win-win position. And hopefully it also facilitates a non-discriminatory open access system, because anybody who wants to use the system can come in and use the network, obviously subject to regulatory approval. But it means that the big plus is that anybody can come into that market without having to be heavily capitalized. They can lease in their rolling stock, very similar to what has happened in the past in the aviation sector. Also important for South Africa and the SADC area generally is that it provides a valuable layer of security as all of the SADC states adopt the protocol in relation to rolling stock crossing borders. You have obviously various areas of concern. One is the state of the rolling stock itself and whether it's properly regulated and so on. But you also have a concern, particularly if you're a funder, as to whether you can get your asset back if something goes wrong at the end of the lease term or the financing. And therefore, having a common system where SADC states gradually accept and realize the benefits of the Luxembourg Protocol will make it a lot easier for the finance sector generally, and a lot easier for operators. And what it also does is it encourages more collective thinking, common procurement strategies, common finance strategies, common standards, which also helps regional interoperability and regional integration. This is something that I know, because I'm involved in this, that the AU is directly addressing to see where gradually one can develop, at least on a regional basis, common standards, particularly where you have a common gauge system. Next slide, please. This is interesting. A lot of rolling stock that is delivered to South Africa and countries around South Africa is financed in part with support from the export credit agencies that work under what is called an arrangement. There's an official arrangement between the ECAs setting a floor as to what premium rate they can charge when they are financing railway rolling stock. And unfortunately, over 60% of states in Africa are categorized with the worst possible credit rating. And I think another 25% are the second worst The result of that is that the premiums are high and painful, because they actually restrict the development of the rail sector, which in turn is part of a development strategy for the economies. So it's somewhat counterproductive, but nonetheless, that's the way the arrangement works. Now, in relation to the aircraft protocol to the Cape Town Convention, the export credit agencies have agreed that they will reduce their risk premiums by 10% when that protocol applies. And we are putting a lot of pressure now, as the Rail Working Group, of which ARIA is a member, of course. We're putting a lot of pressure on export credit agencies within this official arrangement, so it's all the OECD states, to apply, at the very least, the same discount when the Luxembourg Rail Protocol applies. We would suggest not 10%, but actually more, because at the moment, the ECAs are burnishing their credentials, being an environmentally friendly organization. They want to support sustainable projects. Environmentally sustainable aircraft are difficult to find. Environmentally sustainable rail projects are very easy to find. So in our view, if the ECAs want to show by their doing rather than their words that they are prepared to support environmentally sustainable projects, they should be certainly not giving a preference to financing of aircraft. That makes no sense at all. And indeed, we think they should be giving a higher discount in relation to railway rolling stock. And we're going to need your support on this. We're constantly pressing, but governments have to press, the AU has to press, to make sure that the ECAs realise that there is a real body of opinion here that needs to be responded to. If we go to the next slide, this just illustrates the concern. Look at those risk classifications. The vast majority in Africa have very high risk classifications, and that's unfortunately a problem for the ECAs. As soon as the ECAs give their underwriting of credits with a reduced premium, that will actually make the whole financing structure much more financially sustainable, which I think will help all operators in the African space. Let me move on to the next slide, please. The Orvis numbering system I mentioned before is also a critical component, because we can see a whole range of different benefits that will come from the fact that for the first time everywhere we'll have a unique rail vehicle identification number, and it doesn't change. Once it's been issued, it never changes. A little bit like the chassis number on your car. It's the permanent identification, and it's in a way quite extraordinary in the rail sector that we've never had this, because you have it in telephones, you have it in computers, you have it in aircraft, of course you have container ships, but not in rolling stock. That is changing now. And from the 8th of March, we now have a system where these Orvis numbers are now being issued, and they can be issued obviously in a very cost-effective way. Let me just move on to the next slide quickly. So looking forward, what we want to do is to suggest that the finance community presses governments to adopt the Luxembourg Rail Protocol wherever you can, seek the opportunity to push governments into moving forward. We need to get that risk premium down on export credits. We also should be looking at maybe marking rolling stock where we can with the Orvis numbering, even when the protocol is not directly applied, because the benefits of actually putting the number on the side of the wagon are there even on a domestic legal basis. And of course, it means that you can also register your security interest, even if it's not a full international interest under the protocol, because then suddenly your interest is visible to the public. And then as the protocol is adopted, particularly in South Africa, practitioners should be looking at existing financings and how the priorities of those financings should be enhanced and protected as we go on. So next slide, please. So to conclude, it's a powerful tool for the African rail sector, and the registry and the Orvis numbering system will produce a lot of operational benefits for operators, both nationally and regionally. And by reducing creditor risk, of course, we expect that it will reduce the cost of financing, which makes projects both environmentally and economically sustainable. And by lowering the barriers to entry, supporting open access, it will lead to a much more dynamic integrated rail industry in the coming years in Africa. And the Rail Working Group is obviously very proud to be involved in that project. Thank you.
Howard, thanks very much for that presentation. It's extremely insightful, and congrats again on the formal enactment of the protocol. A couple of questions, Howard, that have come up, and I see one that is from Dumasani, where he says, how does the protocol stabilize the rail rolling stock market, considering the fact that invariably funders are likely to come from the developed north, and the funded will mainly be developing countries? How do we avoid the increase in African indebtedness to developed north funders? How does the protocol build local capacity and develop local rolling stock capacity in light of ACFTA?
Jamie, I'm sorry if that was a question to me, but I only heard part of it, I'm afraid. And the reason for that is my battery's about to run out on my laptop. I'm sorry for that. But if you could just say it succinctly, and hopefully I can reply before the battery runs out.
Okay. The question is, how does the protocol help Africa, considering that most of the funders will come from the developed north, and Africa is already over-indebted?
Okay.
And then the question is, how does it seek to build local capacity?
Yes. Well, firstly, there's no reason at all why the funding can't come from South Africa, from other financial institutions across Africa. The key point here is that it provides incremental security. And what you may well see is consortia of some investment coming in, and not just debt investment, maybe equity investment coming in from outside of Africa to help develop the rail system, because of course the financing structure is more secure. So it will bring in some investment for sure, but this is not restricted to monies coming in from the developed world. And at the end of the day, of course, the funding has to be sustainable. At the end of the day, the rents have to be paid. But the point of the exercise is that we know that there are huge benefits of developing the rail sector in Africa. It's just how we realize them. And what this does is to produce that.
Howard, thanks so much. I think we just lost Howard. To emphasize that there was a concern raised a couple of years ago that the Luxembourg Protocol was dictating that countries that adopted the protocol had to utilize European technologies. And that's really not the case at all. It applies to rolling stock that comes from South Africa. It applies to rolling stock that's manufactured and funded in South Africa, or in Zimbabwe, or in China. The fact that it's called the Luxembourg Protocol is the only association really that the protocol has with the developed world. It really is there for the benefit of everybody by reducing credit risk, irrespective of where the rolling stock is manufactured and where the rolling stock is funded. And I think, having had the negotiated funding agreements in the past, one of the biggest challenges in the region is that if your trains are going to be going across multiple jurisdictions and banks are taking security over your asset, what it means is that the banks have to be able to go and collect your asset, really exact their security or take up their security over the asset when it's in different countries. And if you're going from South Africa to Zimbabwe to Zambia, for example, on the North-South corridor, you then have to register security in all three countries as the way things stand. Once people have implemented the protocol, you'll be able to, as long as the country is registered in the protocol, you'll be able to go and the banks can take comfort from the fact that their security is registered centrally. It's only one form of security that you need, which is the fact that it's registered under the Luxembourg Protocol. So it really makes funding so much more efficient, irrespective of where it comes from.
Jamie, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sorry, I've come back in again now because my laptop was no longer working. I'm sorry, I apologize for that. I just want to pick up on a point that you mentioned there, which is that with a global system, which means that the same rules
Howard, your connection's very bad. We can hardly hear you. We're hearing every fourth word, I think.
Maybe if he sits closer to the mic.
Howard, sorry, we're losing you. Okay, thanks. I think we've lost Howard, but hopefully that addresses the question from Masani. If there are, Marcelo and Klapo also asked that we explain the benefit for Transnet and South Africa. I think Howard has done that in the presentation, and hopefully we see the implementation of the Luxembourg Protocol. Remember, it's the Luxembourg Protocol to the Cape Town Convention. So it was actually initiated in Cape Town, in South Africa. This is the Luxembourg Protocol to the Cape Town Convention. So it's actually an African initiative originally. So I think that brings us to the end of our presentations today. If I can just finish off with a request that people that have joined us today who are not members of the association reach out to Marcelo and Klapo and to take up membership of the association. We really rely on members' contributions in order to continue to do the exceptionally good work that Marcelo and her team do on a daily basis. The association is dedicated to the improvement of the rail sector in South Africa. And what we do now will really reverberate, if it's done right, for generations to come, and will be an inflection point that translates to the long-term success of our railway industry. There could not be a more important time for us to have a vibrant and successful and well-funded association than now. And I think the progress that we've seen in South Africa is, of course, thanks to government, but it's also thanks to the tireless work of people like Marcelo that have engaged to ensure that our policies and our reform agenda in South Africa really makes sense. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for your time. I'd really like to thank the presenters for what they brought to us today. And let's turn this into the year of action and implementation. Thanks everybody for your time.